I'm going to cover kind of the broader picture to that. So not only share what worked in a single case, but what is the mechanics behind managing portfolio and using Kanban to manage portfolio. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Pawel. I am a CEO and a leader of Lunar Logic. Lunar Logic is Ruby on Rails software shop in Kraków, Poland. So if you have a project, a web project to build, feel free to send it our way. I also write a blog where I cover lots of stuff around Lean, Kanban. These days, I write a lot about Portfolio Kanban, so if you want to dig deeper around that subject, I strongly encourage you to visit the blog. And of course, you can find me on Twitter with my handle, Pawel Brodzinski. So the question I started with is why portfolio? I mean, statistically speaking, when you hear about Lean, when you hear about Kanban, when you hear about systems improvements, you hear about stuff happening on team level. I don't say that this is the only thing, but statistically speaking, most of the experience reports, this would be whatever is happening in teams. So why I'm focusing on a higher level, like from the perspective of an organization? Well, as Ellie Goldratt famously said, a system of local optima isn't an optimal system at all. I mean, as long as we are focusing on teams and teams only, we are probably going to end up with a system that doesn't work optimally. And no matter how much effort we will invest into improving the efficiency of our teams, if those teams are building something that doesn't really make sense, we don't get points for that. I mean, there are lots and lots of research that shows the same fact, that features we build in our applications are not used. Chaos report that says 2/3 of features are either rarely used or never used. Research run by Victor Basili and Barry Boehm, more than half features in big software products are not used. Same story over and over again. And if we are doing the wrong thing, no matter how effectively we do that, it's waste. Or as Stephen Parry keeps repeating, if we are doing that more effectively, it's just cheaper, neater, faster waste. Well, still waste, unfortunately. So a question for you, who is working in your teams or in your organizations in an environment where a single team is working on more than a single project or product? Almost everyone. That's what I supposed. This is the common practice. So a team would work on more than a single thing. Why is it bad? Because multitasking doesn't come for free. This is probably the most frequently used slide throughout all my different presentations. This is Jerry Weinberg. For each concurrent task we do, we pay the price, we pay the tax of 20% of our time wasted to context switching. So 2 concurrent tasks, 20% of our time wasted. 3 concurrent tasks, 40% of our time wasted, etc., etc., etc. Now, one may argue that when we are talking about a team working on different projects, where people would switch from one project to the other, not on a daily basis, but they would work on one thing for a couple of weeks, then would switch to the other for a couple of weeks. So it's not really multitasking. Or a situation when a team is just split. So the part of the team is working on one project, the other part is working on another. So one thing is that we have the cost of coordination. So some people coordinate that effort on different projects. The second thing is people do communicate. I mean, people ask questions, need help. People are working with each other. So then they have to switch context from one project to another. But there's another thing. Whenever we are leaving something unfinished, there's this thing called Zeigarnik Effect that kicks in. This is basically our tendency as humans to think about stuff that we left unfinished. So if I'm on one project and I planned to do some stuff in that project, but then I'm switched to the other, I will be thinking about the tasks I left incomplete. So if you want to understand how Zeigarnik effect works, like think, when was the last time when doing something totally different, you out of the blue thought about that email that you forgot to write, bill you forgot to pay, that mother-in-law you forgot to call? This is exactly Zeigarnik effect. This is how it works. And the same thing happens in our workplaces, where we would just think about a task that we left unfinished. And this is another reason why, another proof why multitasking on a team level, meaning working on a few different projects, is costly, comes from Larry Macaroni. Toby, during his presentations, mentioned Larry already. What Larry is doing is Larry gets an access to anonymized data from more than 40,000 agile teams. And he's trying to make sense out of it. I'm simplifying things a bit. So Larry is doing quantitative research against lots and lots of source data from different teams across the world. And one of his conclusions is that for teams that could focus on a single project, on a single initiative, were significantly better in terms of the quality. So not only we are less effective when we are working on a couple of projects concurrently within one team, but also we are when we split our focus, we produce the end results of lower quality. And there's obviously time to market. If we try to build a few things concurrently, we would switch from one to the other. So the first scenario, so the whole time of building the stuff will be longer than in the second scenario when we start another thing only when we finish the previous one. But not only that, look at the difference in time to market when we can deliver the first thing. This is the difference. It's not about how long we are building everything. It's how far we can deliver value to the client, how far we can get feedback from the client, how fast we can act on that feedback. But those things are relevant when we are talking about scenarios when, say, a team is working on 2 projects, maybe 3 projects. So when a situation is kind of under control. Now, this isn't as common as we would think. Klaus Leopold, Kanban trainer from Austria, you may know Klaus from different events. He's working as a trainer and coach. He's working with different clients. And one of his stories is this. When he started working with a client, he found out that 25 developers were working on 113 projects concurrently. It's not 2 projects per a team. It's 5 projects per person. I mean, like, forget about all the multitasking stuff, all the cost of multitasking. Use a common sense. How effective can that be? Like, there's no freaking chance that there is a bit of efficiency in such work. So the interesting question is why such thing happens. I mean, like, using common sense, no reasonable person would just do that to their teams. Yet those things happen. Why? Well, my answer would be that people are doing that with a goodwill. They just don't have visibility. They just don't know that they're harming their teams and their companies. Because when you think about the tools we have to manage portfolio, we typically have something that I call Excel frenzy. Those humongous Excel sheets that are supposed to cover all the important data. Well, if you try to make sense out of that, you can probably filter that to the columns with project name, client name, expected cost, and planned income. So, and you want to make sense out of that. So how the decision-making process look like in such a situation? Well, we look at any project from the cost perspective. and potential income perspective. We look through attractiveness glasses. So we suppose that this project will cost X. We in contract have that the income will be Y. Since Y is bigger than X, it's going to be profitable. Seems attractive. We should start that. So this is basically how this decision-making process works. And this is how, because most of the projects are attractive. I mean, no one signs a contract where the expected end result is losing money. Okay? So from that perspective, we just start more and more and more stuff because we will earn more and more and more money. But there's a problem with that, because the question is how we know the cost. Well, we do estimate, right? The income is, when we are talking about fixed price projects, the income is fixed. Like, that's why the name. How do we know the cost? We estimate. When do we estimate? At the beginning of the project, even if earlier, before we sign the contract. How much do we know about that project then? As little as possible. This is the worst point to make estimates about the cost, about the effort. So if we are making such decisions, we basically doom our teams, because they have no chance to do it right. Well, at the same time, we should be asking questions: where is the value? Like, not what is the cost, what is the income? Where is the value? Where is the value for the client? Why it is valuable for the client? Where is the value for us? Because like one thing that I hear over and over and again is like we should be looking for value and value for the client. Okay, fair enough. I can agree to that, but value for the client doesn't necessarily mean value for the vendor. So we should be thinking on both ends. So where's the value? What is the cost of delay? So which project can wait? And not only cost of delay as a number, like thousands of dollars, but also what is the function of cost of delay? Like does it grow linearly, or it has a fixed date, or it's intangible? So we are now talking about the very different metrics we should be using to manage portfolio, except we don't have them. So this is the problem. So my answer to address those problems, my answer to address all the most common pain points on portfolio level is Portfolio Kanban. And the thing I want to do right now is just to very briefly guide you through different approaches to visualize portfolio, through different visualizations of Portfolio Kanban. I don't want to get into too much details. So if you want to discuss a specific approach in more details, please catch me during one of the breaks. So this is the approach that is kind of my default one. So two things that we have here is in rows we have teams, in columns we have months. So basically we have a timeline. It can be months, it can be weeks. In neural logic I'm using weeks. And everything that is inside, these are projects. And depending on how much space a sticky note representing project takes, it represents how much it's how big part of the team it requires in this time period. So basically, if you want to see the representations of a single project, you should see for all the sticky notes with the same name, which is a project name. We have all different classes of service, so different types of projects, which typically is kind of important, especially if you have maintenance projects, because you are dealing with them very, very differently than with greenfield projects. And the most important part, the white space. The white space is our free capabilities. So basically, white space answers the question how much more we can start. There are also green stickies on the left. which is work that we aren't yet committed to do. So it can be sales funnel, or if you have on the previous presentation on portfolio, it can be this whole process of getting all the allowances or getting through government, internal government or politics or whatever you have, just to start the real work. So this is one approach. Another approach would be two-layered Kanban board, or, well, with 3 layers it gets too messy. So we have the big stuff that flows here, and inside we have swim lanes that describe stuff, work done on a more fine-grained level. So this is the approach. That may work when we have pretty small projects or products that we build, because otherwise there will be too much happening here, and we will hit this problem that we have, too much details in the middle, so no one is paying attention to what is happening. Another approach is mimics this traditional Kanban board. So we have a flow of work in kind of standard process for projects, and projects flow from the left to the right. The tricky part here is that if we are dealing with big projects, those stickies would be stuck in one place for months and months and months. And this is a problem because if the stickies are stuck, people stop looking at them. People stop taking care of the stickies, and this is the first step to not keeping the board updated. And if the board is not up to date, the same is true for every task board or Kanban board, no matter whether it's portfolio Kanban, team level Kanban, or personal Kanban. If it's not up to date, you can throw it away. It's not useful. And finally, something as a food for thought. This is also portfolio Kanban board. This is interesting. This is actually not a company from IT. So all the big sticky notes are projects. But in this case, process of building a project wasn't homogeneous. So for each project, the steps would be defined based on what kind of project it is. So it could have one step or a few steps. Those steps could be different. Those steps could be done concurrently, or one would depend on the others. So basically, anytime a project was started, the flow was defined by those stickies. So each of those small sticky was a part of the process, and the color of those small stickies represented the status of this step. So green would be for done, yellow would be for in progress, and red would be for to do. The funny part is that we can limit work in progress with such approach on 2 levels. We can limit number of projects we are working on. Here we are working on 4 projects. But we can also limit work in progress on a lower level, which is how many subtasks we have started. So how many yellow sticky notes we have. And again, we have 4. And this came up as an answer to a very specific environment, because none of standard approaches to visualization work in that context. And this is basically something I want you to remember from that part of the presentation. There is no such thing as a standard visualization for portfolio Kanban. There is even no standard pattern for visualization of portfolio Kanban. Of course, you can use some of the standard approaches, but you have to be even more open for new ideas regarding visualization than you are whenever we are talking about the stuff happening on a team level. Now, the interesting question is, and the question I was asking myself for quite some time, can we even call it Kanban? I mean, my reference point to Kanban is the Kanban method, as it is described in the book. So, well, we have a nice visualization, but the question is how much it is aligned with Kanban, with the definition as we know. So let me start with the important part, which are principles. Well, the funny part with principles, and this is something that David was stressing today on his keynote, is that they basically describe values or general approach, how we should work with the method. And it's not a method that we should follow. It's not a recipe. Kanban is not a recipe that we should follow. It's not Kung Fu, right? It's this Bruce Lee technique, which I don't remember the name, because I'm not that much. Maybe you can help me, David? Thanks. So if you read through that, this is basically how we should approach implementing Portfolio Kanban. Start with what you have. It's not changing the way we manage our projects. Agree for evolutionary change. Without that, what's the point of making effort? Respect the current situation, respect how we work. Again, like starting just as we are working right now, and not like introducing some new awesome recipe that will change everything for the better. And finally, encouraging leadership on all levels. And this is something that I find visualization very useful for. So once you put your visualization in a place that everyone goes to, where everyone goes to, like water cooler, or the toilet, say. Well, on the way to the toilet, not in the toilet. The funny thing that starts happening is people start paying attention. So I would say that visualization of Portfolio Kanban should be not in a place where if you have a PMO at the company and they have a room, this is the last place where Portfolio Kanban board should be. It should be accessible for everyone. Because what is happening? First, regular people start looking at that and learning like what other folks at the company are doing. But more importantly, the leaders are doing the same. So team managers would just stand at the board and look, okay, I'm just about to start this new project. I will need a couple of more people. Well, but I see in 2 other teams, they have lots of white space. So they're free to help. So maybe I would go to talk to those people, and maybe we will find out. Managers are taking decisions for staffing of the projects that they are doing, which is something that without broader knowledge of what is happening across the company just wouldn't happen. And there's obviously a second part to Kanban method, which is practices. So let's quickly go through those. Visualization. Well, it all starts with visualization. I just shared a few approaches to that. Limit work in progress. Let me leave it for the end, because limiting work in progress on portfolio level is the most challenging thing. Out of every bit of Kanban as we know it, on portfolio level, this one is the most important. Managing flow. So one thing we have is monitoring, which visualization always help with. The other thing is measuring the flow. And this is actually interesting because all the work I'm doing around Portfolio Kanban, I don't pay much attention to measures. You know why? Because if there is one thing that we have plenty of on portfolio level, these are metrics. We know how much effort we invested into project. We know how much money we spend on those, what we have built. We typically have all those informations. This is the last thing that is missing in the whole picture. Then we have explicit policies. I would say that this part is actually very similar to implementing Kanban on any other level. So as long as you start doing something around Portfolio Kanban, everyone who is using the tool should be on the same page in how it works, what every single sticky note on a board means, how to make sense out of it. Implementing feedback loops. I've just given an example how feedback loops work without engaging kind of PMO or decision makers, how managers on team level can start talking to each other. One thing that seems to be a common practice on portfolio level are weekly meetings around portfolio board. Why weekly? Because projects don't change so frequently. We don't need daily updates. I mean, if we had daily meetings around portfolio board, it would be like, nothing changed, nothing changed. And today, surprise, surprise, nothing changed. I find weekly meetings frequent enough to be able to react fast to whatever important things are happening, and not frequent enough so people don't feel overburdened. Now, the second feedback loop on very low level is basically visualization, available for everyone, for line workers, for leaders, for managers, for people from PMO, project managers, but also for the execs. Another feedback loop that is there are discussions that start around whatever is on the board. So basically, when I started using Portfolio Board, I started talking with my CEO. You see, we are already full. We cannot start this new thing. And surprisingly enough, I realized that on C-level, there were no such discussions ever before. No one was starting them. So this is another feedback loop we can implement. We can use on portfolio level. And finally, improve collaboratively, evolve experimentally. I sometimes say that given that every other thing on that list is done right, this doesn't need to be on the list, because it would be happening anyway. But in terms of improvements, so what happens? When people are informed, they start changing their behaviors. So one example I've given, people would start deciding how to cover for projects they are building for themselves. In that story, before Portfolio Kanban, every single decision about staffing was made by me. So anytime any manager needed one more person, it was like, come to Pawel and ask him for more people. Doesn't matter if it did make sense or didn't, I've had to make these decisions. Then suddenly I realized during weekly meetings around the board that people started making those decisions by themselves. Actually, people started looking at the board, looking for interesting projects that they can join. So how I defined this evolutionary property of Kanban, I typically define it when behaviors change, we are there. And the Portfolio Kanban are changing the behaviors. And by the way, when I was preparing the slide deck, I realized that, I don't know if you knew that if you write the practices of Kanban like this, they are like Christmas tree. So there's one last thing to cover, which is limiting work in progress. Why limiting progress is such a challenging thing? Because of variability. I find it very, very common that the ratio between the smallest project an organization runs and the biggest one that this very same organization runs is like 1 to 200. So example from Lunar, the smallest project we run, 2 people, couple of weeks. The biggest one, 6 people, 20 months. My previous company, smallest project, a single developer, around 2 months. Biggest project, 25 people, 1.5 years. Those differences are huge. I mean, compare those two squares. This is basically 1 to 200. So if we try to come up with a number, a sweep limit for portfolio, it doesn't make sense, because we can exchange one of those big, huge projects with dozens of small ones, And it still makes sense.
Does it matter? Does it matter that you have different size? Is it about the work item, isn't it? If you finish them quicker, you get what you want, don't you?
If I finish projects quicker, I get what I want. However, the problem is that to finish in, say, a quarter project worth 25 people working for a year and a half, you would have to scale up the whole company because you would lose a lot of time on communication. Like adding more people doesn't improve productivity kind of linearly. So this is a very tricky thing. And this is why coming up with a number as a whip limit, I haven't yet seen that implemented and working. This may happen only in situations when you are in full control over what you build. So some product organizations can do that because they can split their products into similarly sized chunks, and then they can say that they are not working throughout the organization, that they are not working on more than 3 of those.
If you use money, budget?
Okay, I'm happy to discuss how to limit work in progress using money, but I didn't find it useful too, either. But let's keep it for the break. So this is why when we are talking about limiting work in progress on portfolio level, we're talking about conversations, and I'm extremely happy that those conversations on your presentation upstairs popped up. Because this is a key thing in Portfolio Kanban. So basically how it works, whenever we are just about to start a new thing, the people who are about to make the decision would gather around the board and start discussing whether we have free capabilities, what will be the impact of starting a new project on the team or the teams. If we cannot start it instantly, what is the cost of delay of that project? Look, I'm not talking about cost or income or profit. I'm talking about different things. If we are deciding whether we have free capabilities to start only one project, but we have 3 on our plate, which project delivers most value for the client, for us? These are very different metrics. So basically, we start talking, and we eventually come up with the idea whether we can start the project or not. And typically, the answer would be no. We cannot start it. The problem is that there are projects that we cannot reject. I mean, my previous company, the biggest client of ours, came to us with the biggest project in the history of the company. You don't say no to that. Not a chance. Like, first person who would say no, we won't do it, would be fired. So what do? Again, conversations. If we had to fit this project to our portfolio board and we have not enough free capabilities, something has to go. What is the project of least value? What are the projects that have low cost of delay so we can defer them? Again, talking about very different metrics than we typically have on portfolio level. So why does it help? How does it help? Let's take a quick look at 2 cases. This is one, 5 teams, several months. They are working on different projects. We have different classes of service for projects. Do you see a problem here? Or it's perfectly okay? Very little white space. Not much free capabilities. Yes, that's true. Something else? A lot of maintenance, yes. Anything else comes to your mind? Sorry? Team maybe a little bit stressed. Yes, they are, because they are heavily multitasking. Another situation. Again, 5 teams, several months. Any ideas what is happening here? not that much multitasking, more free capabilities. Both cases, for the first 2 months, we have zero flexibility. But look how it is changing in future. There is a big difference. People are working more effectively because they are focusing on a single thing. They are building something of better quality because they are focusing on a single thing. We, from a perspective of the organization, have more flexibility to start something new. So a quick look at those boards. You know nothing about those teams, but you can make some sense in 30 seconds looking at the board. This is the power of visualization. And by the way, a quick marketing plug. This tool isn't yet available, but if you like this approach to visualization, you can sign up at clearly.io. It will be to get the access once it's available for the public. So visualization on portfolio level basically gives us a chance to make informed decisions. Instead of just looking from this attractiveness glasses, we make decisions that are driven by the current situation and that take into consideration the impact of starting a new thing on the situations. They are anything but that. And by the way, it's not secret. So if I want to point like why Portfolio Kanban works, it's because it shifts discussion from focusing on cost, income, profit to very different things, to value. Cost of delay, risks, impact on a team. Very different focus. This is why discussions start to look very differently. And this is exactly where this evolutionary property of Portfolio Kanban can be seen. This is when we start evolving not only how we manage portfolio, we start evolving the whole organization. And again, coming back to the very beginning of the presentation, Ali Goldratt, we are changing the organization. We are optimizing not just a team or a couple of teams, not just a project or a product. We are optimizing the organization on a very high level, meaning that the risk of sub-optimizing the whole is way, way, way lower. But there's more in that. So this is the basic approach with Portfolio Kanban, but there is more interesting stuff in that. Kanban, as I learned it, the very nice thing about Kanban, it was very inclusive in its spirit. It was inviting, different things to merge, to improve. Again, the Bruce Lee story from today's keynote. Learn different stuff, add one to the other, and then when you are in a street fight, you will be able to react. The first time I heard about the approach treating work items in backlog as options were from Alan Gotte's dinner. So basically what Alan says is that backlog is just a list of unvalidated options. And once we commit to that, well, they stop becoming options. But we can use exactly the same pattern thinking about projects. Before we start a project, it's just an option. We can start that, but to the moment of commitment, whether it is signing a contract or starting work or whatever the moment of commitment is in a given context, it's just an option, unvalidated option. And who here was on Lee's Keogh presentation? Again, read that book. This is exactly the point where the real options idea fits very, very well. When deciding which project we want to start, and given that we treat different projects as options, we can perfectly use real options to help us to make this choice. Real options are very simple. Options have value. Actually, having options, keeping options open is valuable. So deferring the moment of commitment is valuable. Options expire because our clients won't, or users won't wait till the end of the world to allow us to start a project whenever it feels comfortable. And we shouldn't commit early unless we know why we are committing early. So again, I will come back to the example. The biggest client, the biggest project ever. We committed early, but we knew why we are committing early. Because it was not only it was very valuable for us, it was very valuable for the client, it was very valuable for our relationship. It was win-win-win situation. So this is why we committed early.
When you say the biggest, do you mean the biggest in value or the biggest in scope?
I say the biggest in size. This was the project that was biggest in size, biggest in income as well, because it was fixed price, unfortunately. So on many scales, it was the top one ever for the company.
So how did you come to the size of the project? Like, because it's fixed price,
It was the biggest in terms of effort, estimated effort needed to build it. It was biggest in terms of money we would earn for that. It was biggest in terms of, well, I wouldn't estimate in lines of code. But anyway, I'm happy to discuss the project at the end. And this is actually very aligned with Todd Little, who does a lot of different things around risk management. And Todd Little says that best poker players don't play every game. They play the game they can win. They play games that have big potential outcome. And the same thing, the same way of thinking we should apply to managing portfolio. I mean, what's the point of starting all the projects? We will end up having 25 developers and 113 projects. Like, how valuable is that? How much we are going to gain from that? And when we are talking about this options and commitment model, there is very interesting connection we can build starting from portfolio level. So let's consider we have a bunch of potential projects. These are options. And we make a commitment to start one of those. What happens then? Then we generate options on a lower level. So a commitment on a portfolio level would generate a bunch of options on project level. This can be features or coarse grain requirements or epic stories or whatever, depending, of course, of what project exactly is. And again, we choose some features and commit to those. And what happens then? We generate options on yet another level. So we can decide how we want to build a feature, or which things we want to include, which we want to exclude. So again, every commitment on a higher level generates options on a lower level. So we can think about this cycle going through different layers of organization as, well, one thing that is missing here is obviously feedback loops. So basically decisions that are happening on a project level should inform later decisions on portfolio level. So if we are going slower than we planned, we shouldn't be committing to more on portfolio level. Imagine that we planned to finish a project in, say, September. But we already know before vacations that it will be late. So it would be stupid to commit to something from early October, right? Because we know we will be going late. But this is what people do. I mean, like, they have their estimates, and they assume they are true, even though they are not true, and everyone knows that. So these are feedback loops. Another feedback loop which we have in this model. So this is basically a cycle going through different layers of organization. This is basically divergence convergence cycle. So we diverge. We generate lots of options on portfolio level. Then we converge. We choose one project. Then we automatically have divergence. We generate options on on project level, like features. Then we converge. And I stole this model from Jay Bloom. he was using that in very different contexts. I don't remember what context was that, but the model totally made sense for me in this context. And you know what? You want to know where limiting work in progress happens? Here. These are the points. The convergence points basically happen because we consciously limit work in progress. And this would happen if we didn't. So we would have loads of projects that we start. Every single one looks attractive, so we start them. Then we have loads of features that we start. We don't limit work in progress within projects, so we start all the features. Then we try different approaches. What we end up with is 113 projects for 25 developers. What we end up with is very, very colorful hell. I don't wish you to go there, although some of the companies already are there. So just to summarize the whole message around Portfolio Kanban. The common problems with portfolio management are too much multitasking, too many projects started, a lack of visibility, which result in too many projects started, and cost-driven decisions, cost or income-driven decisions. Now, visualization helps us to address the problem of lack of visibility. Visualization gives us a nice tool to answer the question, what is happening right now? It informs the decisions on starting new stuff. WIP limits, and in this context, these are most likely WIP limits by conversation. Unless someone will show me the hands-on proof that numerical limits work in this context. I haven't seen it yet. So WIP limits help us to address problem of too much multitasking, too many concurrent initiatives, and they steer discussions about projects toward discussions around value. Finally, all the constraints as a whole introduced by the method are responsible for this mind shift from focusing on income, focusing on cost, to focusing on the value, focusing on cost of delay, focusing on impact of starting new stuff on the organization. And they incentivize to say no. Basically, Portfolio Kanban is about saying no. Portfolio Kanban isn't about choosing the work we do. Portfolio Kanban is about choosing the work we don't do. Because every now and then, a typical organization would have just too much stuff to do, too much stuff they are willing to do. So this is a tool that helps us to learn how to say no. And this learning happens because of mind shift from looking at cost, income, profit, looking from this attractiveness glasses to looking at capabilities glasses. What we can reasonably do, how much value we are going to generate. What is the cost we have to pay to make it happen, and not cost within the within the constraints of that project, but the cost paid by the whole organization. And this is the long list of inspirations of the work on Portfolio Kanban. I just tried to distill it in that presentation. I don't know if it's readable because as I started preparing that list, I've had to make fonts smaller and smaller and smaller so it fits the screen. The funny thing is, I don't know how many of you don't have Twitter account. Who doesn't have Twitter account? Only a few people. You know what? All of those guys are on Twitter, with the exception of Eli Goldratt, who, well, isn't with us anymore. So small marketing for the product that is not super extremely good, but it gives you the access to the very wise people. Thank you, and we have a few more minutes for questions, which I'm happy to answer.
A company who takes months, like build new capabilities. Like if we don't have how actually it can expand.
Okay, so what is the question?
Because you said that it's about saying no.
Yes. So what is the question?
So the question is, if we assume that a company can expand, then is it a valid statement that it's about
Okay.
saying no?
Okay.
Or it's about making it happen. Like,
So the question is, assuming that companies have a capability to grow, to hire new people, whether the real question is about saying no to new work. Well, my answer for that would be, let's assume that your capabilities are fully exploited right now, and I am a client and pop up at your doorstep and say, I want to start a project, 10 people, starting tomorrow. How fast you can build a decent team of 10 people, how fast you can grow. This would be one answer. The other answer would be that the simple fact that we potentially can start a project doesn't mean that we have to start it. And if we start thinking in terms of value, cost of delay, impact, we will be making different decisions. I can give you a good example. We were working with one client, a toxic guy. And we finished the project for him. He came back a couple of months later, he comes back with more work. And we had free capabilities to work on that. But because I knew what would be the impact on a team that would have to work for a toxic client, I said, no, we don't start that. Because for you, it may be valuable. This is, by the way, a nice example why the value for the client doesn't equal the value for the vendor. For you, we can deliver you very good software. You would get your value, but I will pay the cost of people who are frustrated.
yeah, okay, it sounds to me that I hear that companies cannot expand. And I believe you are not sharing this, so that's why I'm pointing out that companies do expand. There are different ways to do it, but companies do expand.
I would point that expanding shouldn't be connected with short-term project-related decisions, but expanding should be correlated more with long-term strategy, which is a very different discussion. But yeah, this is one of the options to address the problem.
You pointed out a number of times that to make proper decisions on shall we do this project, yes or no, that there are multiple criteria to be taken into consideration. You showed us a few examples of what could a Kanban board look like, and I remember very well the role with the teams. Isn't it the case that whatever visualization that you choose, that will dominate the criteria? So you've shown us teams with the white space, so people will very quickly reflect, oh, there is white space, so we have capabilities available, so let's fit in. Well, I would think that you would like to go for a multitude of visualizations, maybe of the same thing, to just encourage that line of thinking in terms of what does it bring to the company, what's the cost of delay, so that we really need to look for different ways to visualize.
So there are basically two questions, if I read you correctly. One is whether a specific way of visualizing stuff influence which things we are focusing on most when making decisions. Yes, that is true. So if we create this board where the key axis is free capability, like visualizing free capabilities, it will be probably the first thing you will think of because you see that like all the time, and all the other metrics you will have to come up with. And the second question was about the different ways, whether we should use different ways, concurrent ways of visualizing stuff. I didn't try that personally, because, well, different ways of visualizing stuff may focus on different things. I didn't try that personally, and I would say that it may be difficult to maintain because people would have to concurrently update two boards. So this is one thing. The second thing is that the crucial metrics, well, not all of them, but part of them, are not related with the board as a whole, but related with a new project we want to start. Sometimes, okay, when we have to make a trade-off decision, we want to know the cost of delay for any project we want to discuss, but then we can say, okay, we may want to delay this project. What's the cost of delay of that? We don't have to know upfront. It's enough that someone is able to answer that question when asked. So we don't have to keep all the metrics online, which can be very, very difficult. And Don Reinertsen says that companies that can answer a question, what is cost of delay for stuff they build, it's less than 2% of all the companies. This is the difficult question. So you can try, although I would say that from a perspective of maintenance, it would be better to find out visualization that addresses key metrics that you want to visualize, whatever they are. And obviously you can add those to the board if you find them crucial.
Yes, well, thank you for an interesting presentation. I can see the value of the board as giving a snapshot of what's going on right now and as a good framework for discussion, but is it really valid to use it for forward-looking planning? I mean, by doing so, you inevitably sort of go down the path of sizing and scoping and estimating work. So is that right, really valid, or are you suggesting that, or is it more for a sort of snapshot of current view?
So the question is whether board is valid for planning future work. For me, personally, extremely valid. It's not that I have to focus on estimation of new work that is popping up. But the key answer I'm looking for is what kind of free capabilities and how much of those I will have when. And this may happen in a small organization, this may happen on individual level, it may happen on team level, but basically what you want, like the ideal situation is that you have most of your teams are busy and some of your teams, say Chris Madsen and Olaf Madsen in commitment book are using team liquidity, and they're saying between 5 to 10% of people should be able to pick up whatever comes. And well, I don't have a number in like such a number in my head, but I would say that you want to have some free capabilities all the time so you can react. Because if your teams are 100% utilized, you have no flexibility to start something new. So, so for planning, extremely valuable. Although, of course, you can misuse that and say that, okay, so if I have 2 people, I'm looking for a project for 2 people. I wouldn't go that path.
In order to know how many sticky notes, how many months ahead you're going to place pink sticky notes ahead, I guess you have to have some sort of idea on how big is the scope.
So I'm using the best available knowledge. So if it's fixed price project, we estimated something because we've had to come up with a number which we put as a cost, so we could come up with the price. So I'm using that, and once I get the feedback from whatever on this lower level, from project level, whatever is happening, we are going faster or slower, I just update that. So when I know that project will be late, I instantly update that. Because like one thing is that the financial guys may want to track the costs, overrun, blah, blah, blah. The second thing is you want to have visualization that is up to date with reality, no matter the plans made half a year ago. So, are we finished? Are you? I'm happy to continue during the break. I was just kicked out from here. Thank you.